Hello and good evening. Welcome to Anupali. I do hope you are having a wonderful Sunday. You are ready to
some game right after, and it will be two.
This is no doubt and certainly a welcome addition for the city of Roseau as we embark on new initiatives to develop sports in Dominica. The new facilities will provide young men and women of Roseau and environs with an avenue to develop their skills in various sporting disciplines, including basketball, tennis, and netball. The project speaks to our commitment as a government, not only to sports development on the island, but to the provision of varying opportunities for young people to channel their passions. I commend the parliamentary representative for the Roseau Central constituency, Honorable Melissa Skerrit, for championing this project and seeing it to completion. We really owe a serious debt of commendation, debt of gratitude for our efforts. This past week, we handed over 18 new homes to residents of the Carnago territory. Once again, this government's commitment to the comfort and well-being of citizens was on full display. We remain determined to provide the people of the Carnago territory with suitable housing for the upliftment of their families and the advancement of their livelihoods. In the next few weeks, work is expected to get underway on 50 new additional homes for the Carnago territory. On Friday, we launched the second phase of the Work Online Dominica program, which forms part of the government's ongoing development of the digital economy. The Work Online program aims to give Dominicans the opportunity to find lucrative employment online. The first cohort has had significant success with sourcing remote employment opportunities. I look forward to the program providing more and more of our people with new means of gainful employment in the digital space. On this week's episode, we speak with a distinguished Dominican, one who sits at the helm of the CARICOM Secretariat, our regional organization with the mandate of supporting and promoting an integrated Caribbean community. Ambassador Erwin Larocque assumed the office of Secretary General of the CARICOM in 2011. Before that, he served at the CARICOM Secretariat in the position of Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration. In that post, Ambassador Larocque provided strategic leadership for the continuing implementation and further development of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. He has a very proud history in Dominica's public service, where he held the post of Permanent Secretary in various ministries for more than 14 years, including the ministries of Trade, Industry, Enterprise Development, Tourism, and Foreign Affairs. This August, he will vacate the seat of Secretary General of CARICOM after serving the mandatory maximum 2 terms in office. I've invited Ambassador Larocque to speak with us on his career, his time spent in the top post of the regional organization, and his outlook for the future. You can interact with Ambassador Larocque by calling 611-3400 or 225-3400 with your questions and comments. I am proud to welcome Ambassador Erwin Larocque to Anupali. Ambassador, welcome.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you. Good evening.
How are you doing these days?
I'm great, PM. I'm keeping great. What about you?
Pretty good. Busy life, hectic life, as you know, with this pandemic. But we still ourselves through. So I'm fine. How are things at the CARICOM Secretariat?
Well, Prime Minister, first of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to your program. I really welcome this opportunity and to say good night to all the listeners and the viewers. Well, things are fairly okay at the Secretariat, PM. We've had to, as you know, adjust to the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to introduce certain protocols, but overall, they've worked quite well. We've not seen our services being diminished. We're not at full staff at the Secretariat, we're on rotation, but the services have not diminished. We've continued. As a matter of fact, last year into this year, I've been extremely busy with all of the various meetings that we've had to conduct in coordinating with the CARICOM. But I think we're doing fairly well, health-wise and otherwise.
Okay, well, please convey my regards to the staff at the Secretariat and our gratitude for their continued service. Now, Ambassador, since the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, we have coordinated some of our responses as a regional bloc. How would you assess CARICOM's overall response to COVID-19?
I think we've done fairly well. And it's not just from my perspective, it's from the perspective of others who have watched on in terms of how we've treated with the health aspect of it. Of course, there's an economic aspect, which I'm sure we'll get to. From a health aspect, when you look at the figures and you compare per capita with other regions and other countries, and given the fact that we were behind, we didn't have the resources to do all what we wanted to do, I think we've done fairly well. We've coordinated very well. CARICOM, the CARICOM Public Health Agency, has been the science advisor to all the member countries, to our region, and member states have utilized it as and adjusted accordingly as per their domestic situation. But I think by and large, the figures speak for themselves on the health front. Of course, some countries we're in a third wave now, and some countries are having some spikes. But I think citizens have a responsibility as well to do their part and to observe the protocols. And I'm afraid it's not always the case in some of our member states where protocols are not totally being observed. But other than that, I think from the perspective of coordination and the work of the member states, I think we've done fairly well.
I would certainly endorse this as well. Now, on the economic front, how much of a challenge, though, will CARICOM states face to bounce back from the economic impact of the pandemic?
I think it's going to be quite a challenge, VM. First and foremost, the international financial institutions, the IMF in particular, and others have said that our region is the most affected region economically in the world, given the fact that we are so heavily dependent on tourism. We've seen our tourism industry more or less decimated over the period of last year. There's some reopening going on now. We've seen revenues decline in member states as much as 50%, while expenditures went up. We've seen last year impact on GDP of almost 20% among many of our member states, the average being 15% for the region. The only country who didn't suffer as much is Guyana, and it's because of the oil resources that they have. To grow out of that, of course, depends on us being able to access the vaccines, to vaccinate ourselves into herd immunity. We've been balancing lives and livelihood, but it's going to be a tough stretch. And some of the analysis is suggesting that by 2024, if we put in place, if we're able to get the vaccines and administer them accordingly, that we should be back to where we were pre-COVID. But of course, a lot is dependent on achieving herd immunity. So we have a good stretch among us, and there's going to be a lasting effect on debt. Many of our countries have had to borrow their way through the pandemic. As I said, revenue has decreased. Expenditure has gone up to buy the public goods, the PPEs, the test kits, and now the vaccines. And they're not cheap. They are not cheap. As well as many member states have put in place social safety nets at the national level and paying for other things associated with it. So I think we have a good stretch ahead of us, Prime Minister. And the worst is not yet over. I hope it is. We see new variants coming into our region. I can just hope it is. But again, I can only stress that our citizens have to play their part and observe the protocols. I cannot say so enough. And the hesitancy, the vaccine hesitancy, which we're experiencing in our region, I just hope that people understand that the vaccine saves lives and it also saves jobs. And please get vaccinated.
Yeah. So, I mean, the region will certainly, I agree with you, will be facing a very tough challenge in our march towards recovery, economic recovery. As you pointed out, there's a high debt. The debt is growing. Access to financing is a challenge for many countries. But we are a resilient people, a resilient region, and I'm sure that we will overcome. Now, Ambassador, let's look back on your tenure, though, as head of the organization. You assumed the leadership of CARICOM, the CARICOM Secretariat in 2011. Before that, you served as permanent secretary in various ministries in Dominica. How did your career as a senior public official in Dominica prepare you for this important role?
Yeah, more than you can imagine. The public service of Dominica, in terms of being at a management level, and having had the opportunity and the honor to work with so many good public servants in the system, I have to say from a management perspective that I learned a lot. There are one or two persons who I consider to have been my mentors. Charles Maynard, may he rest in peace. Not wasn't only a minister, he was also someone who understood management and public service and public administration and the systems that we had in place. And again, it prepared me in a great deal. Also, of course, having participated on behalf of Dominica in many of the fora of CARICOM, I had an understanding from a member state perspective. I brought a member state perspective as well, not just a perspective from the countries. It brought an understanding of what are the challenges that countries have sometimes in implementing what the Secretariat or what the region is seeking to do. And I think that served me very well. And to this day, I still try to draw on it. I try to keep in tabs with what are the challenges our member states have going forward. But I think without that, I probably would have not been where I am today. So I do appreciate having worked, and it has been a tremendous challenge, tremendous success in terms of me going forward.
Well, I must say to the public, I recall the day when Ambassador Edwin Carrington came to me and indicated that he would like to bring you into the CARICOM Secretariat. He was a bit reluctant to come to me because he understood how important you were to Dominica, because you were at the forefront of the negotiations with regards to the single market and aspects of the single economy. So I believe you were able to impress Sir Edwin Carrington at the time, and I think the rest is history. And I must say that you have done a remarkable job though throughout the years there. Now, what would you say? What would you say are your high points of your time spent at the helm of the CARICOM? And can you point to some of your greatest accomplishments?
Yeah, one of the first things I observed when I went to the Secretariat back in 2005, and as you said, I was at that period Assistant Secretary General for Trade and Economic Integration. But when I began to participate in the other aspects of the work of the Secretariat, I was amazed of the volume of work that was being done there, the range of work that was being there. Of course, my focus at that time was on the economy, the regional economy, and putting in place the CSME. A lot of work had started going back to 1991, 1992. Sorry, the early 90s when we were revising the treaties and so on. A lot of work had been done. But we were focused now on removing the various barriers to bring the CSME into fruition. And that started and in earnest, and I think in 2006 we were able to launch. So my focus at that time had been really on the CSME. However, when I transitioned into the Secretary General's office, a new perspective had to be added to this. I wanted to ensure that the Secretariat as a whole, every single department, I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to improve on the efficiency and the delivery of service to our member states. And for that, I recognized very early on that some sort of reform would have to be introduced. The second thing I set myself to do in the first couple of years was to change the image of the region, to change the image of the Secretariat. I realized that persons just had, and some of them still do, but had such a negative image. I would cringe every morning when I pick up the telephone, the newspapers, to see what was being said about us. And I set myself to link in with the private sector, with labor, with the youth, to try to explain to them and bring them on board, and with the media, very importantly, and with the media. I tried to promote as much as possible. And the third thing was to link out to the international community, because we needed a lot of support. We were still reeling from the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. The region was still reeling from that. And we saw that donor resources were dwindling already. The signs of dwindling donor resources was already there. So I set myself these three platforms: introducing new efficiencies into the Secretariat by way of reform. Secondly, outreach to what I would call various constituents in the community. And the third was the outreach to the international community. I think we've done fairly well. When I look back on if I may start, the CSME is working. There's some areas which I think, of course, could have gone a little much further. I have to admit that, and I'm sure we can discuss this a little later in terms of the areas. But we have had some achievements there. We've gone from 5 categories of skills to 10. I wish there were a lot more. We're still working on some of them. We've introduced, we've now, a major part of the market has been introduced by public procurement. We've also introduced contingent rights so that when persons move in our region, their family can move with them under certain circumstances and benefit from certain rights. Another major issue is the introduction of the multilateral air services agreement, which allows for, hopefully, for the development of our air services in our region, because without air transportation, without transportation integration is not going to work in our region. On the administrative side, I've brought greater coordination among the institutions of the community. There are 16 institutions of the community. They were all working all by themselves. We're now working under a single regional strategic plan. The first ever regional strategic plan was introduced under my watch. And that continues. We are now doing the second one. We meet annually with them to make sure there's no duplication, to make sure that there's greater efficiency in the use of the resources. We've seen greater coordination with institutions such as CDEMA and CARFA and so on. So primarily a myriad of things that we've done on the three fronts. Going forward, I have to mention things in the security architecture as well. The security architecture has strengthened. When I came, I met a number of draft agreements languishing. I brought them into fruition, signature, and members have, it allows for greater security collaboration, particularly given the rise in transnational crime and trans-boundary gang violence. So these are just but a few of them, PM, that we're working on. I wish I could have done a lot more. Time does not allow it. I wish I'd gone a lot more on the reform, but I feel that I've put a platform there that can continue. Greater accountability. Staff must see the member states as their clients. We must do things to achieve results, not just to have meetings and have meetings, but to have meetings that will have results down the road for the member states to the benefit of the member states. So I keep interrogating, what are we doing now that's going to benefit the member states? If you come up with a new idea, tell me how it's going to benefit the member states. And every morning I challenge myself, what can we do better, especially in the past 2 years? What can we do better now to help our member states? And I think a tremendous amount of work has done in that, in terms of coordination and leadership and advocacy.
Sure. Excellent. Now, there continues to be misgivings in the region about the effectiveness of the organization and its usefulness to member states in advancing their development interests. What is your view on this? And how important is it for us to maintain this grouping called CARICOM?
I think it's tremendously important, especially in this world today. We can't survive individually in the international community. There's absolutely no way. Even if we just look at among ourselves, without even looking at the outside world, CARICOM affords the opportunity for there to be trade. When I think back of the days when I was representing Dominica at CARICOM, one of our major aims there was to ensure that Dominica benefited from the trade arrangements. And DCP, Dominica Coconut Products, the old one, of course, I could say that they built their market, their brand and their market on the regional market. Were it not for that, what would have happened? That's on the trade front. We see the advocacy again, what we're doing in terms of right now with climate change. If we didn't have all of our voices talking together in Paris, if we are not out there advocating for greater concessional financing so member states can build their resilience, if we're not out there advocating for the vaccines as we're doing now, individually, but also very, very much so collectively, very much so collectively. The region is now recognized, and I know that you have had a lot to do with it in terms of making Dominica the first climate resilient country. But now the region is being seen as a region that's striving to make itself resilient. And individually, one would not achieve that in this global community. So I would say to them, try to imagine our region without a CARICOM. Try to imagine without a coordination. Try to imagine without a CDEMA that has come to member states. Whenever there's a hurricane in our region, a disaster, the first responders are member states responding through the coordinating mechanism of CDEMA. Try to imagine a region without the RSS. Although the RSS is not CARICOM, the RSS coordinates fully with the CARICOM impacts and so on. Try to imagine the region without the CXC. CXC is part of CARICOM. And I can go on and on in terms of the aspects of CSME. I don't think we should measure the success or the failure on some difficulties that may exist from time to time. I think sometimes when we have successes, we tend to take them for granted and we don't remember them. But if they were to be removed, then you'll see what a big void will be created.
Well said, well said. Now, the issue of free movement and the creation of the single economic space are always at the forefront of discussions. Before assuming your current post, you provided strategic leadership for the implementation and development of the CARICOM single market. How much progress would you say we have made on these matters, and how must the organization continue to pursue these objectives?
Progress, as I said, progress has been made, but I think progress is slow. It could be faster. 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, 1918, 2000, sorry, my years are getting mixed up. We agreed on adding new categories of skill for free movement. We're talking about agriculture workers, we're talking about security workers. Before that, we had spoken about hospitality workers. But we can only go as fast as the member states. The Secretariat does all of the technical work, it gives all the advice. The member states then go back to consult. And one of the things that I have noticed is that we only can move as fast as the slowest member states. And that slows us down quite a bit. So I think if we had another mechanism going forward, we could achieve a lot more. We have achieved a lot, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to minimize that, but I think there could be a greater achievements if we were all working in concert. I think we have before us now an opportunity with the decisions that heads have taken that we will go with the coalition of the willing. Some are calling it the coalition of the willing, some are calling it enhanced cooperation. But those who are ready to go forward, let us go forward with it. Leave the door open for the others to come along. But I think we have to make progress because the people of the Caribbean judge us on the ability to move around, on the ability to be able to apply their trade in their service providers, on the ability to get their goods into the markets of other member states, on the ability to travel within the region hassle-free. That is how they judge us on the day-to-day operations of the community. And I think we can improve on that. I've seen there were days, maybe 5, 6 years ago, traveling in the region was much more of a hassle. I mean, countries, persons were not treated properly. I've seen those days diminish considerably. But I think in terms of advancing, in terms of moving forward, in terms of putting in more harmonized policies, particularly as it relates to some of the macroeconomic issues, I think a lot more can be done. I think too much time is being taken in terms of consulting on issues and not moving forward. I remember again, and I drew on it, when I met with the co-chair last week, I met with them very briefly. I reminded them that when we were reviewing the Common External Tariff and the rules of origin, forgive me for going a little bit technical, but the Cabinet of Dominica appointed a committee. The Cabinet of Dominica appointed an internal committee. I headed that committee along with Ray Harris. We had to report not only to the minister, but to the cabinet ever so often on the progress or lack of progress being made. I get a sense that sometimes these things are not happening, so that sometimes prime ministers are not even properly briefed on what is going on. And I think we have to get the same way I'm asking for accountability in the Secretariat. I think our officials have to be more accountable and recognize that we can move forward. It's to the benefit of all people.
Excellent. No,
I'm sorry to be so frank, Prime Minister, but that's my observations in the past 10 years.
No, I agree with you. There has to be accountability on all fronts because sometimes the Secretariat gets blamed for many things, but these issues reside at the national level. So I agree with you entirely on this point. Now, what, for example, is CARICOM doing or has done under your leadership to remove barriers to regional trade?
That has been a chronic problem. We've put in place for every meeting of the co-chair for the listeners and the viewers is the Council for Trade and Economic Development. It basically deals with CSME matters, the core CSME matters. We have introduced a standing item on the agenda that is for countries who are not compliant with treaty provisions or decisions of the co-chair. It allows for member states to bring their grievances forward to the co-chair for discussions to take place. There have been instances where I've been requested to offer my good offices. The treaty provides for the Secretary General there are various levels of intervention. The easiest one, of course, is good offices, and then it can go up until it can get to the Caribbean Court of Justice. But there is an opportunity for member states to try to work it out bilaterally. The Secretariat, through its various arms, the legal arm or the purely technical arm, will give advice in terms of some guidance. And if all else fails, of course, as we have seen, some member states take it a lot further. But at least there's that opportunity every single time there is a meeting of the heads of government for those discussions to take place. Sometimes you have resolution, sometimes you don't have resolution. Sometimes resolution takes a long time because member states are discussing the issues. But that is the innovation that we put in place. It's not much of an innovation, but I think it helps sometimes to resolve. The CCJ was created precisely, it's not something I advocate that everybody must use the CCJ, but it was created precisely in recognition of the fact that not all disputes can be settled, not all trade disputes can be settled at the level of a council. And hence there are occasions when member states or private sectors avail themselves of the opportunity. We try to encourage, first and foremost, to resolve it as much as possible bilaterally or within the context of the councils.
So what are some of the major challenges you are faced with implementing policies intended to improve economic relations among member states?
I think it's as I mentioned before, a lot of work is done. We usually start off when we're tackling a particular area to look at what are the policies. First, do the technical analysis of what you're trying to achieve. We then go to see what is the policy framework that will guide the next level of work. And then we present that to the member states. Basically, that's how we proceed. If there's need now to introduce a new protocol or a new mechanism for doing something, it is guided by that. And I think some of those things take a very, very long time to get done. Sometimes we study it over and over. That is on one front. On the other front, the challenge that we have faced in the Secretariat is that over the years, there was a time when I don't talk financing, but this is an example. A substantial amount of the Secretariat's budget was financed by development partners, by donors. As much as 60% was financed by donors. Now, less than 40% is financed by donors in terms of doing projects and doing a lot of the technical work. So we find ourselves having to do more with a lot less over the years. So that in itself is a challenge. And again, I come full circle with that kind of challenge. You then have to see how you can do things better, how do you improve on doing things. So it's that circle that we're in. And I think if we had the more person hours to do more work and to reach out, we're not able to reach out sufficiently in the member states to assist in consultations as we used to do before. I think that would help a great deal, a greater presence on the ground, consulting with member states, consulting with the various stakeholders. I think it would help persons to understand a lot better. Of course, we're using the technology now and it's working, but there's nothing on many instances for you to sit with a group of people and have discussions. I've done it before, that I used to do this before when we were doing the strategic plan, sit in a room and hear persons' views, the differing views, see how you factor that in. So there's a number of areas I think that present challenges to us, but I think we just have to keep on going. And I remain the eternal optimist, Prime Minister. And I think in this, you look at what happens in the oldest integration arrangement, the European Union. Every once in a while, there's a flip of problems. You've had one country leaving. We've never had that. We've had some difficulties, some challenges of some countries, having some challenges. We've been able to smooth those out. The heads of government have always been able to sit down and smooth things out. And I think we have to try and have that same level of commitment at the varying levels of our community apparatus and institutions as we go forward.
Ambassador, do you think citizens of the member states are taking full advantage of the benefits afforded to them as part of this CARICOM block? And how can CARICOM benefit the ordinary Caribbean person?
Yeah, I don't think that they are. If you use as an example, the ordinary citizen, the number of skill certificates that have been issued since we started issuing certificates to allow for the free movement of certain categories. It's just over 20,000 certificates that have been issued in a population of countries participating in the CSME, the total population of the adult, of course, of under about 6 million people. That's a fraction of it. It tells you two things. It tells you that persons don't necessarily want to move for the sake of moving. It also tells you that there have been some challenges in terms of giving them the facility to move. Sometimes citizens recognize it might be a bit of a hassle to get the certificates. We developed a program, a project to allow for countries to have certificates issued online, so you don't have to be traveling and moving documents all over the place. We did that. I don't think it has been very successful in terms of use, but we have done this. And again, we have to keep on promoting to the citizens what their rights are. They need to understand what their rights are within the context of the treaty and integration movement. More recently, we've been working very, very closely with the private sector. As you know, PM, the CARICOM private sector organization is now recognized as an associate institution of the community. And I believe that is going to afford the private sector and to take greater opportunities from the CSME. One of the challenges has been put forward to the private sector as a grouping is to bring down the food import bill, because the food import bill into our region is very, very high. We have opportunity in agricultural production. I'm sure we can feed ourselves more of what we consume. And I think the private sector is rising to that measure. But I think a lot more can be done now in terms of working with the average citizen and getting them to understand what's available to them and their rights.
Excellent. So, CARICOM in 2013 developed an energy policy to promote sustainable energy. How impactful has this been? And what are the next steps where this energy policy is concerned?
Well, when we started that energy policy, it was focused on a different area of energy. But we saw with time, by the time 2013 rolled around, as you pointed out, that renewable energy had to be one of the main areas of focus, renewable energy and energy efficiency, because you're going to have power generation using the traditional oil and gas modes, but you have to have energy efficiency. And those areas have received a lot more attention. By the time when we had approved the energy policy, about 6% of our power was generated from renewables. That has been doubled now. Now it's not a large amount, but it's been doubled. We have seen with the cost in some areas and the improvement, the cost reducing for the technology and the improvement in the technology, we're seeing greater use, certainly in solar voltaics, and of course in instances like Dominica, you have the geothermal energy program. We know St. Lucia and St. Vincent are looking at that. So we're seeing more of those coming online. We have wind farms in Jamaica, solar farms in Jamaica, in Antigua and Barbuda. I believe St. Lucia has just launched one or is about to launch one here in Guyana, in Belize, and elsewhere. So there's a greater awareness of that. And I think the issue of climate change and the impact that the energy sector, the traditional energy sector has brought to bear on climate change has given greater awareness, not only from the national level, but also from the development partners and also from investors. So progress is being made, but we do recognize that the investments are capital intensive. The investments, particularly in some of the larger areas like hydro and geothermal, they're quite expensive. And hence, there's an urgent need for the financial institutions to provide financing on concessional terms. They must not look at this purely as economic activity with normal rates of return. It's a public good first and foremost. It's also a public good not only to the country, but to the world, because by using renewable energy, you are making a contribution to climate change. Although our footprint is very small, we are still making a contribution. And the countries don't have the resources, they need the concessional financing to invest to allow that to take place. We are now going to do another review of the policy because it's been almost 10 years since that policy has been in place. A lot has happened. So another review is going to take place. I know that the CARICOM, the energy unit, is working with member states. I know Ambassador Henderson has been very pivotal in working with the CARICOM, that is the Caribbean Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Agency, in assisting member states. Only 2 weeks ago, we partnered with the OAS. Well, the OAS partnered with us to host an energy conference in which we invited the development banks, we invited the private sector, and the region presented a pipeline of projects. Member states contributed what are the projects in the pipeline, and that was put forward, and contacts were made. Of course, there's a lot of follow-up to be done bilaterally at the member states level. But we have to make progress, Prime Minister. We must make progress in renewable energy. And there's a good economic reason for doing so. we use a lot of foreign exchange to import fossil fuels into our region. Of course, with Guyana and Suriname coming on stream, they'll be more available, but still, it's the world market that dominates the prices. It's not a price that is concessionally negotiated among CARICOM member states. It's the world market price. So to the extent that you could, in the long run, benefit from it, I think is an investment that has to be made.
So, outside of the strict boundaries of CARICOM, what are the most pressing development issues you believe now face small island states like ours? And how can we continue to position ourselves as small island states to compete or rather survive in this very competitive global environment?
Like I said, the most critical issue, the most existential threat that we are faced with is climate change. Climate change. And we have to continue working on that from the various fronts. Of course, at the national level, a lot is being done to become climate resilient. But on the international level, we are this is one of the areas where CARICOM member states have coordinated very, very well. Again, I refer to the Paris Agreement. I went to that meeting, I saw the results, I took part in the negotiations, how we fought hard 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to get even a reference to 1.5 degrees into the agreement. At that time, there were so many voices against us. Now more and more people are recognizing, and the science is showing that it's an existential threat to small island states like the Caribbean. We cannot afford to keep building back after every disaster. We cannot afford to keep doing that. You'll be building the same bridges over and over. You'll be building the same seawalls over and over. You have to harden your environment, harden the infrastructure. And in doing so, the cost is a lot higher. So the next challenge, as I mentioned before, and we've been advocating for this over and over, is to ensure that all countries of CARICOM, not just those that are lower middle income, but the middle income and the higher middle income, have access to concessional financing. We cannot afford to borrow in our region at 4%, at 6%, to rebuild bridges and to rebuild seawalls and retaining walls. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make development sense. And I think the irony of it all is that the same development partners, the same financial institutions come after the hurricane, and they give you a concessional, some concessional financing. Had they put in the money in advance, and the studies have shown that for every dollar you spend in advance in building resilience in your infrastructure, you save $7 post-disaster. And that was done by the IMF and the World Bank. That is there. So it makes good economic sense to invest in hardening your infrastructure, in building social resilience, in building economic resilience. And without that, Prime Minister, I don't know how we're going to survive. It's an existential threat. Of course, you have to diversify the economy. You have to introduce your new areas in the economic activity. But I think this is the biggest threat that we have, the biggest challenge that we have, the biggest developmental challenge that we have. And I do not think, if you look at what has happened with COVID, and before COVID, you had SARS, you had chikungunya, you had other sort of global or hemispheric diseases. We have to gear ourselves for more of those type of disasters. It's not just hurricanes and earthquakes and volcanoes, as is in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are other types of issues that are going to be a challenge to our development. And so we have to make sure that our health sector is also as resilient, not in terms of hurricane only, but being able to respond in an agile way, and which I think we're doing quite well, and we've demonstrated we can do quite well. So those challenges are major to us. And of course, as I mentioned before, the challenge of rebuilding our economies. And the opportunity exists for us to rebuild our opportunities in a green way, because our economies that have been decimated, and now that you have to restart some of the industries, how can we encourage the private sector to restart and to rebuild and to reopen in a green manner, which in itself will help to build resilience in the economy.
Well, I mean, I agree with you entirely. I mean, the issue of climate change is a major threat. And of course, you have these pandemics now and these health challenges with the health system. Governments are putting actions in place, but there's also always the challenge of resources. And all of these regulations that are being imposed on countries like ours, small island states, makes it increasingly challenging. So yes, you're trying to diversify your economy. The moment you try to diversify your economy, here comes certain impositions, whether it's for blacklisting or otherwise. and force governments, countries to take action. And then you find that the area that you have diversified in no longer brings in any revenue because it is overregulated.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, what kind of advice do you have to governments, and here in Dominica, for example, on actions we should prioritize to bring our country to a sound economic footing, taking into consideration all of the challenges that we have. And yes, you spoke about the issue of the development partners, the international financial institutions, and of course even the Caribbean Development Bank. But even in a post-disaster period, the procurement process is so protracted that you find yourself having to live through many hurricane seasons before you can, put systems in place to respond to the last one which affected you some years ago.
And PM, to add to that is that when you're dealing with multiple financial institutions, they all have their own conditionalities, and you have to meet so many different ones.
That's right.
We raised in the last set of spring meetings in Washington, we've raised the issue of a shorter gestation period to realize the resources that are being made available to you. I mean, what has happened? You hear these commitments of climate funds being made available. When you have to try to get those resources, it takes years. You have so many things to put in place. You probably need to employ a whole barrage of persons to do so. Of course, we try to help through the Climate Change Center, but it is like jumping hoop over hoop. And then, of course, sometimes the goalpost is moved. You pointed out, and I forgot to mention, and you rightly pointed out, blacklisting. And only last week, the G7 met, and I must say that the soundings that they're making, it's something that we have to be concerned about in terms of global tax rates and that sort of thing. They keep moving the goalposts. When it suits them, when it was suiting them in their phase of development, it was quite fine. Now that they have reached a certain level and they are saying, well, you must follow us and not do like we did before. And it's a real problem. And again, I can only say, PM, that is where the combined voices of CARICOM countries matter, whether it's in the international financial institution, whether it's to the European Union, because sometimes they do want things from us. And I've seen sometimes when we have held our ground that maybe they might reconsider a particular position. And I think we have to recognize that the strength that we have, our combined strength, is greater than the sum of the individual member states. It is greater. And I think we have to exercise that. But it's not an easy thing, Prime Minister. I know that, and I understand this very, very much, especially now in COVID. But we have to keep trying, and I think that what it is I see that, and you have set an example, and I'm not just saying so because you're on, because it is being said internationally in terms of being resilient. There are a number of sectors that lend themselves to creating employment in our youth sector. Of course, the IT sector is critical in terms of how it can serve us in various areas, make us more efficient in how we produce and how we deliver in our economies. A single ICT space, it has been a dream of mine. It hasn't moved. The needle hasn't moved in that regard, but I think we can do it. I'm hoping that we can commence very soon negotiations with the service providers. We must bring down the cost of broadband. We must bring down the cost of telecommunications in our region. It is too high, in much the same way that the cost of electricity is too high. These are major factors in doing business in our economies, and we have to do it. I think the cultural industries is another area that lends itself for job creation for the youth. There's a lot of talent in our region. We see it from time to time. And I'm not only talking about entertainment, but sporting activities as well, and how we can support those areas. But again, as you said, the resources are needed. And I know it's not an easy thing, but I think we have to keep on advocating for those resources and trying to see how we can grow ourselves. We need to attract foreign investors as well. We cannot grow ourselves out of the debt trap that we're in. When you look at the debt figures in our region, the debt to GDP ratio for many of our countries, we will not be able to grow ourselves out with 2 and 3% growth. You need to have some foreign investment coming in as well. And I hope that our people will be more open and will be open to such investment. Without that investment, we're not going to make it.
Yeah, thank you. Now, as you prepare to leave your post at CARICOM, is there any unfinished business that you would have hoped and that you hope your successor would take on?
There's a lot of unfinished business, a lot. But I think a couple of them, I would hope that she would continue. And by the way, I want to take the opportunity to recognize Dr. Carla Barnett. She is an excellent, excellent person to lead the Secretariat going forward. I hope the reform work that I've commenced, I hope she takes it on board. I think she will. In terms of building greater efficiencies into our regional institutional arrangements, both in terms, not only in terms of the Secretariat, but in terms of our community institutions and how we do business. I would hope that and I know that the advocacy out there will continue. And then we have to continue identifying and working with select areas of the single market and economy to move it forward. We have to implement areas of the human resource development strategy as well. There are certain areas where we started the work, and I hope that it will continue. A lot of the work that we do in the Secretariat, it takes a while to get done, not only for some of the reasons I said before, but because it's developmental and it's incremental as well. Even when you're moving forward in a very positive way, it's still incremental. Like anything else that you're developing, it's incremental. But I feel certain that that the work will continue in the same vein, and I hope even better than I have done, because fresh minds and fresh energy will come to bear on the Secretariat.
Just for the benefit of the listening and viewing public, Dr. Carla Barnett is a citizen of Belize, and she was just appointed or selected as the new as the Secretary General of CARICOM, who will assume the office in August of this year, when Ambassador Larrock is expected to demit office. She will be the first female Secretary General of CARICOM, and so she comes with a wealth of experience in a wide range of fields. So certainly we are excited about she taking on the baton from Ambassador Larrock in August. Ambassador, I mean, what other advice do you have, though, for Dr. Barnett?
Prioritize. Prioritize.
Yeah.
We have to prioritize. We have to ensure that we continue to be accountable so that we can move the needle along incrementally as we go along. It's a long march. You have to be in it for the long haul. And I know she is, and you can't be a faint of heart. You have to have the energy to it. And just keep on managing and keep on working. We'll get there. PM, I'm an optimist. We're going to get there. And when I look back, if I may, my first CARICOM, well, it was CARICOM meeting back in, well, it's such a long time, back in 1987. I was shocked when I, having read about CARICOM was and going to the first meeting, to see that there were total and absolute trade barriers in every single country, against every single country, even among OECS countries at the time. There were trade barriers, significant, pages upon pages, and we've moved that out. And at that time, there was no free movement of persons and so on. So the needle has been moved, we are moving along, and sometimes we don't pat ourselves enough on the back for the achievements that we've made and the efforts that we've put into it. Not recognize, and we don't recognize that the member states themselves are making significant efforts. I know. I have sat in, as you know, Prime Minister, in so many caucuses of heads where the real work takes place. And I can say without any contradiction that every single one of the CARICOM heads of government are committed to this integration project, are committed to this integration arrangement, are committed to seeing the benefits being derived for their citizens. And we just have to keep working at it to get it done. And that would be my advice going forward. And she's going to need a lot of support. The Secretary General is going to need a lot of support, as I have received a lot of support and confidence from the member states.
No, Ambassador, what's next for you? I mean, can we expect to see you back in Dominica, contributing to development efforts here?
Most definitely, Prime Minister. Yeah. You will see me in Dominica very soon. Of course, I would like to take a little vacation first. I haven't had a good river bath in a while, and so on, and a sea bath, and unwind a little bit. But I'm coming home. I am coming home. My wife and I, all of my children are grown, and my last daughter is, well, we're going up to college. So once I bring up to college, I'll be home by the end of the month. End of August, I said. I should be home and resettled and see what's next going forward. Once I've put on my short pants and I push in once again.
I mean, with your background, and experience, leading a major regional organization, are you interested in politics?
Prime Minister had asked me that question about 30 years ago. I'd have a very definite positive answer, but I'm not so sure. I think I have a great better contribution to make in the realm of development under leadership such as yours.
Yeah.
I think
you face millions of people in the Caribbean. You can't be afraid of 71,000 people in Dominica.
That is not part of my being as Prime Minister, but I think
sure.
I just know where my strengths are. I admire persons who go into the political realm. I admire them from all walks of life and all colors and all stripes.
Yeah.
Again, 30 years ago, I used to dabble in the politics before I came to Dominica, support groups and so on. But as of now, I think I can contribute in many other ways, Prime Minister. I'm there to serve.
Sure. Any final thoughts, Ambassador?
Well, yeah, I have to say, first and foremost, I have to thank Dominica. I'm saying so because, as you rightly pointed out, without Dominica, without the nurturing that I had in Dominica, I don't think I would be the person that I am today. And I don't just mean in terms of the public service. I grew up in Dominica. My parents instilled in me what I consider to be, at least back then, firm Dominican family values, which I carry with me to this day, which I try to inculcate in my children going forward, and which I try to use guiding me going forward in everything that I do. And my father once said to me as a young boy, if you're going to do something, no matter what it is, even if it's to clean a window, do it well. Give your best effort. And I have to thank Dominica for that, for nurturing me. Also, my experience in the public service and the persons that I've worked with in the public service, the persons who have supported me. And of course, you are the one who encouraged me to put my name forward for the job of Secretary General. And you've always supported me along with so many of the prime ministers in the tenure going forward. So I have a lot to be grateful for. I could not have done it alone. And of course, my wife and my kids have been a tremendous support to me. In the long hours that I put in when I come home at night, 10, 11 o'clock at night, I can always rest assured that my wife is there waiting for me with a nice warm meal. So there's a lot to be grateful for and thankful for.
Indeed. Well, Ambassador, thank you very much for taking the time off to speak to me on Anupali. Please convey to your dear wife my sincere regards. And of course, I look forward to seeing you in Dominica very soon and your wife. Please also, when you speak to President Ali and Vice President Jagdeo and the leader of the opposition, Albert Hammond, give them all our Dominican regards. And we have had excellent relations with Guyana over an extended period of time. And of course, we remain committed to the CARICOM ideals, and we will play our part as a member of CARICOM in the furtherance of the integration process and being an active member in all of the processes of CARICOM. We wish you a wonderful evening and a great week. Thanks for making the time to be here on Anupali.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and thank you to your listeners and viewers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, we just had a very informative discussion with Ambassador Larocque, who is the Secretary General of CARICOM, Dominican National. He will demit office in August of 2021. And I must say that he has had a sterling contribution tenure at the CARICOM Secretariat in his various roles. And we wish him all the best in his future endeavors. I want to, first of all, extend to condolences to Honorable Danny Luge, the Member of Parliament for Roseau North, on the passing of his mother. And of course, I wish to extend condolences to his brothers and sisters on the passing of their mom. We know it is never easy to deal with the loss of a loved one, far more your mom. So we are with you in prayers and in thoughts, I had the privilege of meeting your mom some years ago, a wonderful lady, and I pray that her soul will continue to rest in peace. I also want to extend condolences to my friend, who I call Auntie Joy Badwill, and family of Point Michel, on the passing of Uncle Marcel. You know, it's very sad. Wonderful man, very easygoing, very sincere man, and we will be there with you to strengthen you, and of course his brothers and sisters, and in particular Judy Sever and the family, and the passing of your brother. We'll be there with you in thoughts and in prayers, but also physically to give you the strength to deal with the loss. My understanding is that this year, Mrs. Badwill, you would have been celebrating some 57 years of marriage together. So this has been a companion for 57 years, and to lose him is always a challenge, and we will continue to pray for you. As we move along, on Wednesday, we will have the sign-in ceremony for the construction of International Airport, the agreement that will signal the official commencement of our efforts towards the construction of our international airport for Dominica. This has been an elusive project, and for good reason. It is a very costly project, and the reality is the international financial institutions won't give you money for this project. And if they do, it won't be in any significant way to allow you to achieve that objective. And the question is, can you go to commercial banks? And if so, which are the commercial banks, and what will be the interest rates that they would lend to us in excess of $1 billion EC dollars? We thank God for the progress we've made towards the realization of this airport. It is an important piece of infrastructure that has so many attendant benefits to our country. So many benefits, and we do hope and pray that we as a country can unite around this project, recognizing the overarching importance of this project to our future well-being and welfare. This project requires our absolute support and encouragement in order for us to advance it, and I hope that we can unite about this. There really should not be a debate whether we should do it, and et cetera, et cetera. Let us engage ourselves in a constructive dialogue on this and other projects. So we are forging ahead. The Lord has been good to us, and we thank Him for these efforts and for His many blessings. That in a time of this global pandemic that has been with us in Dominica in particular since March of 2020, and is still with us, and we do not know how long this is going to last. And as the ambassador indicated earlier, with the different variants coming to the region, some countries still have curfew and lockdown and emergency orders. You know, we do not know. And there's a hesitation on the part of people to move, that we are able to speak about the largest infrastructural project in our history. And one can only give the good Lord all the praises for this. So we're moving ahead with this project. On Tuesday afternoon, we will be in Cochrane, where we'll be handing keys to 10 families, new homes in the village of Cochrane. 10 families from Tuesday afternoon will be moving into brand new homes. And there will be 10 families in Cochrane, in Dominica, who will no longer be in vulnerable housing. They will be in a comfortable, safe, and resilient home to call theirs, and to provide, and to be able to provide better shelter and accommodation for themselves and for their families. And as I've said before, it could be one home that we build, but that is one family less that is in a vulnerable state in Dominica. And we have to continue efforts to ensuring that as many families as possible, can have a decent home. The government will never be able to build all at one time, but we go along. You know, to get to 2, you have to start with 1. And to get to 5, you have to get to 2 and 3 and 4, and then you get to 5. But we thank God for this. As I said, last week we were in the Carnival territory where we handed over keys to 18 families, 18 joyous families. And sometimes people don't understand what this government is doing, because some people don't place themselves in people's circumstance. Empathy is a very difficult thing for many people because it requires time. It requires your ability to listen. It requires your ability to understand what the person is going through. How difficult has life been for that person? How challenging has life been for that person? And it requires you to, if you can, to take decisions and to make decisions and to mobilize resources to help these people get out of the predicament. And so if you do not have empathy, you will never understand why is it so important for the government to continue helping people improve their lives, especially where housing is concerned. The Lord has blessed many of us that we're able to go to the financial institutions and to contract loans of varying amounts, and that we have a salary that we can pay the monthly deductions. But we should not only be preoccupied with ourselves. That's not what the Lord places on earth to do. We have to also be preoccupied with our neighbors and being our neighbor's keeper. And what does that mean to each of us and to us as a nation when we say that we have to be our neighbor's keeper? And so we have to understand what empathy is and to empathize with people. It is really, in simple terms, putting yourself in somebody else's shoe. And it's not about driving by or going to a village and you see somebody in a difficult housing situation or circumstance, and then you take a photograph and you post it on Facebook, and then you say, what is government doing for that person? No, that's not what it is. That's not what it is. That's not what it is. It is about empathy, is about putting yourself in that person's shoe and working towards a solution to that person's circumstance. Let us go forth, my dear friends, and serve the Lord. You know, I've been telling you about looking at the glass half full rather than half empty. And I read a post which says that the pessimist sees the glass half empty, and the optimist sees the glass half full. But the psalmist says that his cup runneth over. It doesn't mean that the psalmist had everything he wanted, but that he was satisfied with what he had. And therefore, he praised the Lord and he thanked the Lord for giving him all that he needed or deserved at the particular point in time. And so we need to reflect on those things as a society and be more positive. Let us be less negative in our thoughts, in our actions, in our deeds. And if we all could do a little good in our life, you know, all we need to do is a little good in our life and a little good in the society and have love for each other, that we can, you know, move away from this internecine political tribalism that will point to a point where we cannot speak to each other. How can we not be able to speak to each other because we are on different political sides? That makes no sense to me. You know, election comes, we will fight each other politically with our ideological views or philosophical views or policies and our programs. And let's debate those. when election goes, a party has been declared victorious in conformity with election laws and the Constitution of Dominica, and even to the point where the courts adjudicate on the election results, why can't we move forward and work together? And may the best party, the party with the best policies and the best candidates and the best ideas, the best plan and the best strategy win. Good night, Dominica. Good night to you. Let's look forward to an exciting week. This is going to be an historic week in Dominica. And you will have to determine on which side of history you want to be when the history of Dominica is written in respect to our economic and social